This episode is brought to you by Planet Depots.
From Law.com, I'm Vanessa Blum in Petaluma, California.
And I'm Lee Jones in New Rochelle, New York. This is Legal Speak, where we break down what's happening in the legal industry.
Each week we bring you the stories that fascinate us, interviews with the people who are changing law, and insight on the biggest developments for lawyers.
Although we're still recording from our homes amid the coronavirus outbreak, there are some things even a pandemic can't shut down. This week, the American Lawyer released the AmLaw 100, ranking the nation's largest law firms by revenue, as the magazine has done every year in some fashion since 1985.
The newest rankings, assessing 2019 revenue and profits, are the focus of today's episode. And if you're wondering whether last year's financial picture even matters when the entire economy has been overturned by COVID-19, well, our newsroom experts say the numbers may actually matter more than ever. The financial strength of a law firm is an important barometer of its ability to weather the current crisis, as are leadership and decisive action in the face of uncertainty.
First up, we'll hear from the American Lawyer's editor-in-chief, Gina Passarella, and from executive editor Ben Seal about this year's rankings and what's ahead for the nation's largest firms. In the second part of the program, Business of Law reporter David Thomas asks Altman Weil consultant James Cotterman for his take on what law firm leaders should be doing to protect their firms.
It's a great program. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Gina Passarella, editor-in-chief of The American Lawyer, and I'm here today with Ben Seal, our executive editor. Well, the two of us have been busy putting together, along with the entire team, the AmLaw 100 package and doing a lot of thinking about the financial health of the nation's 100 largest law firms.
So as we've been building up to the release of the AmLaw 100 for 2020, one of the things we've been talking about a lot is that the numbers for 2019 seem like they matter a lot less this year than they do in years past. At least they could from one perspective. But I think we've discussed quite a bit that in reality, there's a lot more to be learned from the 2019 numbers than there might be in other years, and that they matter more for 2020 than they might normally. I'm curious because I know that you've been covering the legal industry for more than 10 years and were covering law firms in the wake of the last recession. What you think we can glean from the 2019 numbers as firms look to move forward through 2020?
Sure. And it's such a great question because as we look back now on the Great Recession, hindsight's 2020, and we can look back at years worth of data, both leading up to and during and right after the recession, and learn so much from that. And we are doing that. I think that last time around, it was obviously a massive impact on much of the industry, but it felt different because it came on, we saw it coming, it kind of built over time. Clearly in 2008, we knew that there were issues, maybe even 2007, but in 2009 and 2010, we still were feeling a lot of impact on associate hiring and law firms not being as bullish. And it was very concentrated in certain practice areas. There was a problem with the economy, the financial markets had some issues, and it was the real estate industry had issues, and it was all very kind of, you could pinpoint what was happening, and firms with the practice areas in those areas were clearly hit harder than others. It obviously impacted everybody, but it just felt differently. There was a clear problem. You knew where it came from, and you had to work through it to get out of it. This time around, I think firms were hit really unexpectedly, right? And it was universal. Everybody is dealing with this all over the globe, some in waves, albeit. It's not specific to any one practice area. You couldn't plan to avoid this. You have to manage through this crisis. And in many respects, so many people tell us, well, firms are much better positioned to handle the downturn this time around than they were 10 years ago. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Bankers will tell you that the industry at writ large did so much more to shore up their finances, have less debt on their balance sheet, do a little bit more with capitalization, make sure that the lines of credit that they did have access to are committed so that they could tap into that at any point. And firms are also much better managed, right? They have a better C-suite of business professionals that are helping to run these firms. I do think, though, that firms got a little bit back into their old ways over the last couple of years as the industry was doing well. We saw several years of some really good growth. Actually, it was 2019 that started to see that slip a little bit. So we were seeing evidence of a slowdown even before COVID was on the minds of anyone. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad. 5% growth in revenue is not a terrible thing, but it was slower than the year or two before. People were starting to see slowdown. Recession was on top of mind for a lot of folks. Many firms were building up bankruptcy practices already, for example. I think that what we're going to see this time around is it's a little bit luck in terms of the practice mix that you have coming into this. There's certain practices that are just going to do better in this climate than others. But there's also, the issue of where were you with your partner distributions coming into this, and how well of a Q4 did you have, and how much inventory did you come into in 2020? Did you collect on all that already? So much of it is your cash position. And that's kind of the great equalizer in all of this, I think, because law firms in general are not cash businesses. Very few of them have much cash on hand, even those that don't distribute all their profits. That number is few and far between, and they don't have a ton, only a couple months maybe of operating balance. So the great equalizer in all of this for me are the firms that have access to cash, that were profitable enough to help manage through this crisis a little bit longer. And I know, Ben, you've been doing a lot of work looking at the profitability of firms and how much that impacts. And there was some interesting findings, I think, in the AmLaw 100, particularly what's driving profitability growth.
It's one of the most interesting numbers that I saw in preparing the AmLaw 100 report. Since 2014, we've put together this list, which we call the super rich, which is firms that have revenue per lawyer of at least 1.1 million and profits per lawyer of at least 500,000. This year, there were 30 firms in that list. And the gap between those firms and the other 70 is pretty stark, especially when you look at profits per equity partner. The growth that those 30 firms had was 5.1% on average in 2019 compared to the year before. If you look at the other 70 firms combined, their average growth was 0.02%. So basically, when it comes to profits, all of the growth that's happening is happening with those firms that are the most successful, the most wealthy, the most profitable. And they're the ones that are going to be doing the best. And in a lot of ways, I think they're probably the firms that are in the best position going into 2020 to be able to manage through this crisis. But I'm curious what you think about the role that leadership is going to play for these firms. We're about a month and a half in, let's say, to watching how firms are navigating the crisis. And so a lot of firms have had to make quite a few decisions already. What role do you think leadership is going to play in setting firms up for a successful, or hopefully just a not so damaging 2020?
So I think talked to a lot of firm leaders. I've also talked to a lot of associate and staff, and everybody has their own perspective on this. I think above and beyond, it's communication. People handle any type of news a lot better when they feel like they're informed, they know what's happening. I've heard associates say, why is my firm making these cuts? Is it a sign that we are struggling? Are they being preventative? Do they need to be as preventative as they are being? Can I have a little bit more visibility into our balance sheet? So really being transparent in your leadership style. But I've heard from managing partners too that they feel like they're more needed and doing a better service to their firm now than they ever have. They're actually, they wish it wasn't this time, but they're having fun in the sense that they feel like they have a purpose and that they can help effectuate change. And I think, to borrow from a very smart consultant that I was talking to, there's the leader in the time of good who can just help manage things along. And then it might take a different leadership style, both in the time of a crisis as well as post-crisis, as firms may have to get creative and really think about how they're structured and run to manage through what the new normal will look like, whenever that is and whatever it might be. And I think that in some respects, this crisis has helped force some change that a lot of managing partners have been pushing for to no avail for several years, because people don't often change in good times. But this may have helped many of them get across some of the agendas that they've been pushing. I think that they're going to just have to really be very active, vocal, transparent leaders in the months and years to come.
And we'll be following along, and we'll be back a year from now to see what the results of all that work are going to be.
Sounds good.
Remote is the new in-person. Remote depositions may be new to many attorneys, but they aren't to Planet Depots. Planet Depots has been connecting parties to remote depositions for a decade and counting. Their expertise in mobile video conferencing means you can expect a more efficient and streamlined litigation process. To schedule your secure remote deposition, visit planetdepots.com/legalspeak. That's planetdepos.com/legalspeak.
last segment, you heard from a pair of Law.com's top editors on the issues that are front and center for law firm leaders, guiding their firms through challenging and uncertain times. Gina and Ben are, without a doubt, two of the smartest minds thinking about the legal industry and what lies ahead.
Coming up, David Thomas, a business of law reporter in Chicago, examines the ways law firms are responding to the coronavirus crisis in an interview with Altman Wiles' James Cotterman.
This program and the ideas, strategies, and thoughtful conversations we bring you every week is just one of the ways the reporters and editors at Law.com strive to deliver the information you need.
Even with our newsroom shuttered, our teams across the country and around the globe are working every single day to tell you what's happening at law firms and law schools, to explore how the crisis is affecting clients and the courts, and most of all, to tell you what it all means.
This depth and quality of coverage is so valuable, especially now. So please subscribe to Law.com and our affiliate publications and support the journalists who are helping you stay connected even while we're physically separated. For more information and a 20% discount offer, visit at.law.com/legalspeak. That's at.law.com/legalspeak.
Thank you so much, Jim, again, for taking time out of your day to speak with me. I wanted to start off by talking about how the U.S. legal industry did in 2019. It seemed like, by all accounts, it was a good year based on the numbers we collected and sort of what other financial institutions found as well. Can you, I guess, give me your perspective? How was 2019 for everyone?
Actually, it was a strong year. The most important thing is that rates were up, strong, and that was always a challenge coming out of that last recession. I think it followed another good year in 2018. So, back-to-back good, solid years of performance. The one worry, would have been productivity. Demand has been fluctuating up 1%, down 1%, that narrow trading band, and it's been doing that for a number of years. But I think the fact that productivity in terms of basically hours per timekeeper continues to be a problem, and it's an expensive one for firms, and one that we've been advising firms just to get a handle on and deal with this, because if we do have a downturn, that is going to be your Achilles heel, is this warehouse labor that you have. And I think the profession went into 2020 with about a 13 or 15% overcapacity. That means 13 to 15% more lawyers than you really need to do the work that's available to be done in the law firm environment.
But as I understand, 2020, or at least the first quarter of 2020, was at least shaping up to be a pretty good year. Everyone I've talked to have said that, the good times that were rolling in 2019, they continued on in 2020. It didn't seem like, at least at that point, there wasn't any real problem in the market. Is that your understanding as well?
January and February were certainly strong. And what I'm hearing from managing partners is that March was strong as well. But my sense is that March is a tale of two eras. Early March, I think, was probably like January, February. The latter part of March is a completely different animal. So March was the fulcrum. This all started to change in a rather dramatic fashion.
So in your estimation, how bad has the pandemic been for the AmLaw 100? It seems like these days, no one is really immune to the economic effects being caused by the coronavirus and then all the related shutdowns that are occurring across the world. What are you hearing? How badly are law firms struggling with this in particular, the firms that are sitting atop the food chain in the U.S.?
I don't think it's so much that they're struggling at this particular moment, but I think that the alarms are sounding full on at this point. Firms have gone back to their banks to increase their credit facilities, their borrowing capability from the banks, in anticipation of what's likely to come. You've already started to see furloughs, pay cuts, draw cuts for the partners. Those are all indications that they see how serious this is. They're talking to their clients. The clients are always one of the best barometers that a firm has. And they know that their clients are basically curtailing unessential expenses. Some law firm services are certainly essential, but not all of them. Not every matter needs to be pursued with vigor right at this particular point in time. So I think that they're still living off of that pipeline, which was strong. Coming into it, the pipeline, I mean, is so they had strong billable hours. That turns into strong billings, which turn into receivables that are collected. So they're still in that strong pipeline flowing through in terms of collections. But, that's fairly short. You've got a few months, very short runway for a law firm in terms of what it's got. It can come in if they're not replenishing that on a fairly robust basis. You get 4, 5, 6 months out, and you've got some significant cash flow problems if you haven't taken some measure. And the number one in a law firm is payroll, and I'm including partners in that. Okay, even though they're not strictly payroll paid, but once you pay your people, whether they be partners or employees, it's the number one expense item, and the one that you can, if you have to, move very quickly to conserve cash.
Have you seen any patterns in terms of how law firms are reacting to this crisis? Is there anything that's standing out to you, the kinds of measures they're taking to sort of combat or get ready for this crisis?
These organizations had to really pivot. Where it might be common for the lawyers to be able to work out of hotels, their home, airports, any place else, the support staff, not so much. So the shift when they went to you're going to work remotely work from home, that was a significant shift. So there were some expenses there to make sure they had the right equipment. They had the security and reconfigure the infrastructure to handle mostly inbound remote connections rather than within their ecosystem, so to speak. I think the thing that we hear commonly throughout the day on the news channels and everything is that we're all in this together. And I think that's largely been the approach that I'm seeing from the law firms. They're saying this is an all hands on deck. We've got to work to get our way through this, and they've pretty much shared the pain on reducing non-essential expenses, pay cuts across the firm. Rather than mass firings and furloughs and those types of things, more have taken the approach that partners are going to take a pretty significant cut, and we're going to tier those cuts all the way down through the ranks because we want to try to keep people employed and actively engaged in the economy rather than putting them into the unemployment lines.
And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. It seems like one of the ways that's different about how law firms are responding to this crisis than perhaps others is that it seems like partners are really leading the way in terms of how cuts are being leveled at firms. It seems like partner draws or either reducing or cutting monthly or quarterly partner draws seems to be like the first thing on the chopping block, as opposed to mass layoffs or furloughs of associates and staff. I just wanted to ask, why do you think we're seeing this now? Why is this different, or how is this different compared to the past? And why do you think they're doing it? I mean, I can't imagine every managing partner is thinking, yes, we must think of the economy at this point in time when they're looking at all the available options for them.
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. I wouldn't sell the managing partners too short and understand that this is a unique situation. This isn't a series of bad decisions by a company that put it out of business. This is something that sort of was thrust upon us. So I think they're seeing that in a very different light. They're seeing that, we have to get through this, but when we come out the other side, we need a group of people who are engaged, back in the saddle, productive, and delivering on our mission, whatever that mission is for that particular firm. I also think that back in 2019, in our spring of 2019 Law Firms in Transition survey, we asked, what's worrying you? The number one concern was a broad economic recession. So I think that managing partners were thinking about this, set the tone that where people would go into 2020, thinking, all right, 18 and 19, 2 good solid years. We think 2020 could be good. But, there's a number of signals out there in the marketplace that suggest that 2020 could turn. Well, that means that you're doing some preparedness. I live in Florida. So, when we get hurricane season coming up, which it will in a couple months, you do things to prepare for it. Stocking up on bottled water, stocking up on certain food provisions, making sure your batteries and your flashlights and all that stuff are in good order. That's just a level one sense of preparedness. And I think firms probably have been doing that in 2019 and at the start of this year, thinking, well, what are the basic things that we need to do? So I think they went into this with a bit of, they were more prepared for a reaction that they had to, something they had to respond to than they were when they came through the recession in 2008 and 9.
So what do you make then, because earlier you were talking about how one of the weaknesses that we had started to see last year or was becoming apparent last year was that some law firms were at overcapacity, that lawyers weren't being as productive as they could be, that there seemed to be too many lawyers and not enough work to go around. How big of a problem do you think that's going to be now that we're in this pandemic? Or are those going to be problems that are going to really come back and bite certain law firms in the butt? Or what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it will. And it's not just it was a problem within the last year or two. That was a holdover from the recession. Utilization dropped, and it never went back to its pre-recession levels. Firms are hiring for, build it and they will come, and they're not getting the demand increase that requires the increase in the number of lawyers. So that's a problem. It's an expensive one. And if you're going to deal with that problem, the time to deal with it is when the market is good and you can counsel people out of the firm and help them land successfully in a different environment where they will fit better. When you're in this environment, this is an ugly environment to be furloughing people. I've talked to managing partners who said, well, we're going to have to do some furloughs, and it's going to be the ones we should have done 2 years ago. I've had others who I've talked with who said, we're glad that we made the decisions that we did over the past several years because we came into 2020 strong and lean and in relatively good health. So we're in the best shape we could possibly want to be to have to deal with something that we don't want to have to deal with, which is the pandemic.
Do you think a firm's past financial performance will be a good indicator for how you might weather this current crisis? Like if a firm has experienced, say, 5 or 10 years of relatively solid, revenue and maybe headcount growth, do you think they're in a better position to weather this storm than, say, a firm that has experienced negative or flat revenue growth over the same time period?
I think, yes, you can draw the conclusion from what you just asked that a firm that has been riding well economically ought to be better positioned than a firm that has been just limping along. Yes, I do have a caveat, and that is law firms can disappear with remarkable speed and ease. So look at some venerable names in law or even accounting and how quickly they can come undone from what you would think were events that shouldn't do it. Obviously, having strength coming in is an aid. If you make the wrong choices or you're overexposed in the wrong markets, that strength coming into it may not be sufficient to get you through it. You've got to have a bit of luck and make some good choices and respond fairly quickly. I think that what we learned from the last recession is the organization that did the best saw early signals, understood what they meant, and began to prepare. And then when it started to hit, they reacted very quickly. They cut expenses and focused on managing their way through. And those that did that with speed and kept adjusting as they went along were the ones that did the best.
Probably, I think the problem that's sort of underlying this whole crisis is that we don't really know how long this crisis will last. I've had a number of, managing partners tell me that, yeah, things are fine right now. We've got stuff in the pipeline for the next couple months or so. We're going to be fine. It's just that what happens, if we're still dealing with this in the summer and the fall, that's when I think, at least according to these partners who I've talked with, that's when they're going to start sweating. I just want to get your thoughts on that and sort of how important the timing factor is here.
Well, if you think of a traditional law firm model, you get the work in, you do the work, you build the work, you collect the work. It's a 5 to 6 month cycle. If you stop it at one end, you're 6 months from oblivion. It doesn't take long, and I understand why they're concerned. This isn't going to be a bounce back. This is going to be a ramp up. And you've got to not only get through the contraction and the dormancy period, but you've also got to be able to survive the ramp up until you get to a level of activity that you can say, okay, I can survive this. We just don't know what the timing of any of that is. Nobody does. So you have to be flexible and agile. And that's what I think the managing partners are really doing right now is they're teeing up flexibility and agility so they can say, I want to have options. I'm not sure what options I'm going to need. I don't know what I'm going to be facing down, but I'm going to start putting tools in the tool chest. I don't know what I'm going to need in the future, but I'm going to put as many tools in there as I can so that I have as many options to move based upon whatever it is that I have to confront.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for taking time out of your day to speak with me.
You take care and stay well, please.
That's our program for today. Thanks for listening. Please send your comments, questions, and ideas for future episodes to legalspeak@alm.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, you can keep up with the latest legal industry news online at law.com.